All right, welcome back to the channel. I've had some things on my mind lately that I thought would just be helpful to share. One of my favorite forms of coaching is group coaching, and it's something that I'm not the guy that came out of the womb knowing exactly how to do group coaching. I'm the guy that really struggled early on with group coaching, and I thought I would just share some tips that I've learned kind of through trial and error and through maybe having some groups that were kind of a flub, for lack of a better word, groups that didn't really hit home as well. I think we all have those, and through those experiences, it really helps us grow. So just thought I'd share my own personal insight on group coaching and some of the guidelines and rules to start a group with. It seems like a natural thing to, when you start a group, to feel like you need to put some rules in place to kind of manage the group dynamic, right? It can be a lot and can be kind of overwhelming to form a group because there's so many personalities, there's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of things that can sort of fall out of our control if we're not careful. So I thought I would just start by sharing my first group coaching experience and how that went. And I wish I could say this was like I knocked it out of the park and I did a great thing. But a few years ago, I was working with my mentor, Delisa, on forming a group. It was one of my first groups that I had ever done. I think it was my first group, actually, where the story comes from. And I I got about 15, 20 minutes into the group. I was trying to get them to engage with each other and talk, and I was really trying to control things and make sure that everything was happening right, like I was in control of this group. And the more that I tried to control the group, the more the group just kind of shut down and stopped talking. And I think this is a really common thing for new coaches to do, right? To feel like I have to be in control of this group. I have to make sure that people are talking about the things they're supposed to talk about in this group, right? I need to make that happen. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to make this group happen. And unfortunately, I got about 15, 20 minutes into the group and people just quit talking. And it was just me doing what a lot of new coaches do, which is asking a bunch of open questions, trying to get some conversation going. And it wasn't working. I think the clients could sense that I was nervous. They could sense that I was trying to force things and make things happen. And for whatever reason, people just kind of quit engaging. So lost engagement. And my mentor, Delisa, was really gracious. She jumped in and sort of helped me steer the group, right? She sort of took over as the group facilitator, and we kind of co-coached it together. And I learned a lot through that. As always, when we have a really challenging experience like that embarrasses and humbles us, often you learn a lot from that. And I learned a lot about controlling group and what that can do. So I tell that story as an example of really the downfall of trying to control. There's a quote from a book called, I think it's called The Art of Detachment. And one of my favorite quotes from that book is, "If you are agitated ever, you are trying to control, and peace never visits the controller." And in that example, I was really trying to control. I was agitated internally because I was trying to control the group. I was trying to get people to talk about the things that I wanted them to talk about instead of the things that they needed to talk about. So really the purpose of group is to create an environment where people can talk about experiences. So we live in the information age, right? And we've never had access to more information than we do right now. So it can be a temptation to create a group out of a want to educate people, and that's okay. I think there's room for a group that is educative, right? Where you come to it with the understanding that people are going to learn, and you're going to be the source of knowledge and wisdom in that group. And I think there's people that really thrive in that role. I don't thrive in that role. I I think we all thrive in a role where we can create a dialogue, a place where people can talk about ideas and they can talk about their perspective on things. And that's really missing from our culture, from our society. We have all this information, and yet we don't have a great platform for us to all come together and talk about this information. And Andrew Huberman, who's a neurobiologist at Stanford and has some really great info on the brain and how we learn things, and a whole bunch of great resources. I really encourage you to go check out his stuff. But one of the things that he says that really stuck with me, is that if we're going to learn something and really retain it, I think that is a hard thing for people, right? To retain information. But if we're going to actually retain information, the best way to do that is to talk to somebody about it. So for example, if you're reading a book, it's really hard to retain the information in a book if you just keep that to yourself and you don't talk to someone about it. Whereas if you go talk to your spouse or your friend and you have this long conversation about the ideas in a book that you read, it's much more likely to stick with you. And the neural pathways really get locked in when we actually go out and talk about ideas with people. So we have all this information, and yet we have this problem of retention. And I think a group coaching session is the perfect platform for people to have a place where they can talk about ideas and retain information. So as a baseline for a group, the thing that I'm looking to establish is a place where people can talk about ideas. That's really all it is. And you might come to it with a certain topic or something that you want to give people a chance to explore, right? You need some organization there. But at the end of the day, the purpose is for people to be able to talk about ideas. Now, how do we maintain control of a group, right? That's always the fear. And I think it comes from a place of fear. This need to control things and to control what people talks about comes from a place of fear. And that's what was going on with me when I did my first group session and landed on my face. I was fearful. Honestly, I was scared of the group not going where I wanted it to go. And so I was holding on to control. And that control kept people from experiencing a creative flow. Now, if I want to establish a group that has more creative flow, it's necessary for me to have less rules in place. We need less rules. Rules restrict creative flow. And you know this through, an example of this would be in a city or an HOA. An HOA is a great example of this. So in an HOA, I don't even know what HOA stands for. These are rules that govern a housing community. So for example, if you live within this housing community, there's certain rules that, you can't park your car outside of your garage, or you can't plant a tree without going through the proper authority to plant that tree, or you can't have chickens on your land, or you can only have a certain amount of pets, and they have to be either cats or dogs. They can't be chickens or goats or gerbils, for example. So within that system, right, there's a lot of rules that restrict the creative flow that you can bring into your property or into the land that you live on. Same is true in cities, right? Cities are governed by a lot of rules, right? The more people, the more rules, generally speaking. And in a group session, we're creating more of, and my goal is always to create more of a tribal feel, right? Less of a, we live in the city that's governed by a lot of rules, and more of a, hey, we're all part of a family, of a tribe of people that is struggling with chronic pain, for example. That's the type of people that I tend to work with, people that are struggling with chronic pain. And so the atmosphere we want to create is this atmosphere of sitting around a fire with your tribe. And when we sit around a fire with people we care about, we don't need a lot of rules. We just have dialogue, right? We let ideas flow through us. So, if we were to have a bigger group, for example, if we had a group of like 30 people, something like that, there'd need to be a lot of rules of being on mute all the time, rules of raising your hand before speaking, right? The more people create more rules, the need for more rules. But in a group coaching session of like 3 to 8 people, less rules creates for the environment for more creative flow. So this doesn't mean that you're not going to have any rules, but I will say that if you want a group with good creative flow, you need to find a way to create less rules. So you might say, how do I do that? How do I create a group that doesn't have rules without people stepping on each other, right? Without people being rude to each other or offending others? And I think we've seen over the past few years here how that can happen, right? But realize usually where that happens, where people are offended or people step on each other or people are rude to each other or hurt each other, usually that happens over social media. Not always, but usually it happens through this like artificial place that we've created, where we don't have face-to-face interaction. So realize that in a group session, if we can create face-to-face contact or even over Zoom or something like that, it'll create an environment where we're governed by we have the need to use less rules because we're face-to-face. We're not on a screen typing to someone that we're not actively engaged in. So I'll tell you that the only rule, I'm a minimalist when it comes to rules. So my only rule is that we treat each other as we would like to be treated, right? We work with basically the golden rule of, and I tell clients this, that I trust them to treat each other with love and respect and non-judgment. And that's really it. That's the only rule. Treat each other with love, compassion, and non-judgment. And you don't need any rules beyond that. Now, if there are lines that are being crossed, obviously there might come a need to jump in and create some rules, right? So maybe someone is offended by curse words, and so you may need to come in, talk to them individually, and then come back into the group and say, hey guys, let's just, for the sake of what we're doing today, do our best to keep our language clean, just so that we maintain an environment that's, that's happy and joyful for everybody here. So that may be an example of a rule that might have to develop later. But for the most part, that rule of treating each other with respect and love and compassion and non-judgment is the only rule we really need. Because when people realize that they're not disconnected from each other, right? They are, that when someone else hurts in group, we all hurt, we all suffer. It all makes us tense when someone is hurting. So I know that's kind of a long-winded explanation of the rules of group. Another rule that I think is really helpful is to ask people to come off of mute. And this is to ensure that they have the ability to speak as if they're in the same room. So if you do things through Zoom, it's really helpful to have everyone come off of mute so that there's not this long pause in between, going over and trying to click the unmute button and coming off of mute. Everyone is already as if they're sitting in the same room together, and it creates better creative flow. So, in summary, the more we try to control, the more agitated we get, the more stress we are under, the more stress the clients feel, having to follow all these rules and make sure they don't offend people and make sure that they're following the guidelines and not going to get kicked out of group. Setting people free from that creates a space where we can have creative flow, creative dialogue, can solve problems, talk about ideas, and retain information, right? Through verbalizing the things that we're either learning through video or through podcasts or through reading. And, and finally creating a group where there's a place of non-judgment, right? And the coach is the one that role models that. So, it starts there, and we hand over trust to our clients. We trust them to treat each other with love and compassion and respect. And if the need arises to create more rules, we address that as it comes. And, like any of this stuff, this is my way of doing things. This isn't to say this is the only way to do it. And I really encourage you, with all of the things I've shared today, don't take what I'm what I'm saying as gospel. Go out and, do your best to experience this for yourself, test it out, and come up with your own ideas about what works best for you. This is what works for me. So this is how we learn the best, right? Through experience, rather than just taking what someone on the internet says and doing it without questioning or experimenting with it. So anyway, that's a few of my thoughts on group coaching, some of the guidelines and the rules that are necessary for it. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about our coach school and the training that we offer, please feel free to reach out to me. Find us at paincoachacademy.com. So anyway, have a great day, and thanks for watching.